My girlfriend just demanded my heart for another man. She thinks it's her ultimate power play. But for me, it's the final, triumphant step to bring my true love back from the dead. Seraphina Thorne's voice, usually a cool, melodic cascade, had sharpened to a glacial edge. Arthur, you know the terms. My Julian needs a heart. You're a perfect match. This is the final task, Arthur. Task 100. Her eyes, the color of a winter sky, held no warmth, only a chilling certainty that bordered on entitlement. Arthur Stone, who had spent the last 5 years as her compliant, almost invisible shadow, met her gaze. A slow, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips, a flicker of something she couldn't quite decipher. It wasn't the broken, pleading smile she usually extracted from him, nor the resigned sigh she expected. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated triumph, a silent rebellion simmering beneath the surface. Of course, Seraphina, he murmured, his voice surprisingly steady, considering the enormity of her request. Whatever you wish. His calm acceptance seemed to momentarily disarm her, a tiny furrow appearing between her perfectly sculpted brows. Good, she said, recovering quickly, dismissing the flicker of unease as irrelevant. The surgery is scheduled for tomorrow. Be ready. Ready. He had been ready for this moment for 5 long years. 5 years of biting his tongue, enduring her casual cruelty, her unwavering devotion to a man Arthur knew to be a parasitic leech. 5 years of performing 100 bizarre, humiliating tasks dictated by the system, an entity that had whispered promises of resurrection into his most desperate hours, binding him to a contract of pain and pretense. Complete 100 tasks for Seraphina Thorne, the designated host, and your true love, Lily Evergreen, will return to you. That had been the bargain. A Faustian pact, perhaps, but Arthur would have sold his soul 1,000 times over for Lily. His Lily, whose laughter had once filled his world with sunshine, now lay in a permanent slumber, a victim of an accident he blamed himself for. The system had found him then, broken and grieving, and offered him an impossible hope, a second chance bought with his own humiliation. Task 99 had been to retrieve Julian Blackwood's ancestral locket from the bottom of a venomous snake pit, a feat that had left him with scars now hidden beneath his clothes, a constant, itching reminder of his servitude. Each task, no matter how degrading or dangerous, had brought him closer, not to Seraphina's affection, an affection he never sought, but to Lily's breath, her smile, her life. And now the 100th, to give his heart. A poetic irony, he thought, considering his heart had never truly belonged to Seraphina. It had always been and always would be Lily's. Seraphina saw it as her ultimate victory, a testament to Julian's irreplaceable value, a final act of devotion to the man she worshipped, blissfully unaware of the true puppeteer. She saw a weak man, finally breaking, giving up everything for her. She couldn't be more wrong. This wasn't surrender. It was liberation. This wasn't sacrifice. It was strategic exchange. Every insult, every cold stare, every dismissive wave of her hand, every time she chose Julian over him, had been carefully catalogued, not for resentment, but as fuel for his unshakable resolve. He had played the part of the devoted, heartbroken lover flawlessly. He had been the pathetic, easily manipulated placeholder, the unwitting stepping stone in her perfect love story. But the real story was his, and it was about to begin. Tomorrow he would die in Seraphina's world. Tomorrow Lily would live again in his. And Seraphina, the woman who currently held his life in her hands, would have no idea of the intricate, brutal game he had been playing, a game where her beloved Julian was merely a pawn, and her own heart was about to become the collateral damage. The smile on his face widened almost imperceptibly as he turned to walk away, a ghost of triumph in his deep-set eyes. He felt a profound sense of peace. The suffering was almost over. The true reckoning, however, was just beginning for everyone else. The chill of the winter evening was a stark contrast to the oppressive heat of Arthur's internal triumph, a sensation that had barely dissipated before he found himself swallowed by the opulent chaos of Julian Blackwood's birthday gala. The Thorne estate, a sprawling monument to old money and new ambition, shimmered under a canopy of fairy lights and bespoke projections that painted the night sky with celestial wonders. Inside, the grand ballroom, draped in silk and bedecked with exotic flora, teemed with the city's elite, their laughter echoing like hollow chimes against the clinking of crystal glasses. Seraphina Thorne, a vision in an emerald gown that mirrored the fierce fire in her eyes, moved through the crowd, her hand perpetually linked with Julian's. Julian, ever the picture of delicate charm, wore a tailored suit that seemed to enhance his cultivated vulnerability. He leaned into Seraphina, whispering endearments that she, with a soft smile, received as if they were the only two souls in the universe. Arthur watched from the periphery, a silent, almost invisible fixture. His uniform, a discreet black, marked him as Seraphina's personal assistant, a glorified shadow existing solely to fulfill her every whim and Julian's, by extension. The humiliation was a dull throb, constant and familiar, a quiet counterpoint to the system's countdown. Each dismissive glance, each casual order from a servant who saw him as beneath them, was another grain of sand in the hourglass, another step closer to Lily. The true test of his resolve came as the party migrated towards the estate's private lake, where a fireworks display was about to commence. Julian, amidst a circle of admiring friends and Seraphina, dramatically held up a delicate platinum bracelet, studded with sapphires. "This, my dearest Seraphina," he announced, his voice just loud enough to carry, "is a symbol of my unending devotion, a family heirloom passed down through generations. My heart, in sapphire form." Seraphina gasped, her eyes shining with an adoration that twisted a bitter knot in Arthur's gut. The of her blind affection for this manipulative man was painfully evident, a performance for the ages. Then, with a feigned stumble that was almost imperceptible, Julian let the bracelet slip from his grasp. It arced through the air, a tiny, glittering arc, before splashing into the frigid, dark waters of the lake. A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. Julian's face immediately crumpled into a mask of abject despair, his voice trembling. "Oh no, my grandmother's bracelet. Seraphina, my love, I'm so clumsy. What have I done?" He turned to Arthur, his innocent eyes widening with theatrical distress. "Arthur, you were right there. Did you bump into me? It was so quick. I hardly saw it." A chill wind whipped across the lake, mirroring the ice in Arthur's veins. He knew the accusation was baseless, a deliberate act. Seraphina, instead of questioning Julian's absurd claim or even offering a moment's thought to Arthur's potential innocence, rushed to Julian's side. Her voice, usually so imperious, softened with concern. "Julian, darling, don't blame yourself. Accidents happen." Then, her gaze, cold and unyielding, swept over Arthur. "Arthur," she commanded, her tone devoid of warmth, "get in there and retrieve it. It's an irreplaceable family heirloom. And be quick about it. It's freezing." Arthur felt the collective weight of eyes on him, a mixture of pity and disdain. He could hear some murmurs. Poor man, always cleaning up after them. Of Seraphina's complete disregard for him, her utter cruelty in prioritizing a material object and Julian's delicate sensibilities over his well-being, was raw and exposed. His fists clenched, but his face remained a placid mask. This, he reminded himself, was part of the plan. Every drop of humiliation, every shiver of cold, fueled the furnace of his ultimate goal. Without a word, Arthur stripped off his blazer and shoes. The icy water, black and unforgiving, closed around him as he slid in. It was a shock, a brutal invasion of cold that stole his breath and seized his muscles. The lake bed was muddy, treacherous, and visibility was zero. He plunged his hands into the murky depths, fingers growing numb, searching frantically for the small, precious object. The jeers and whispers from the shore were distant, muffled by the water and the roaring in his ears. He was dimly aware of Seraphina, her arm still linked with Julian's, occasionally glancing towards the water, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes, perhaps a fleeting moment of guilt, quickly dismissed, or merely impatience at his perceived slowness. It was the barest hint of a human reaction, swallowed almost immediately by her devotion to Julian. As Arthur dove deeper, his body aching, his fingers brushed against something hard near the murky roots of a willow tree at the water's edge. It wasn't the bracelet. It was a small, waterproof recording device, cleverly disguised as a discarded pebble. He pocketed it instinctively, his mind already calculating. Just then, he heard voices, unnervingly close, muffled by the water but clear enough to decipher. Julian, his voice devoid of its earlier distress, was talking to a friend, hidden by the willow's drooping branches. "Can you believe it, Mark? The drama!" Seraphina nearly cried. Julian chuckled, a cruel, self-satisfied sound. "Honestly, it's too easy. She's completely infatuated. She thinks I'm this delicate, sensitive artist, still reeling from my tragic past. As if I cared about that tacky bracelet. It was just a prop to make Arthur dive in. He's been looking too content lately. Needed to put him back in his place." Seraphina, seeing him emerge, snatched the bracelet from his outstretched, trembling hand without a single word of thanks or concern for his condition. She merely examined it under the light, then, satisfied, clipped it back onto Julian's wrist with a tender smile, completely ignoring Arthur, who was now dripping and shaking on the cold, muddy bank. The faint flicker of hesitation he thought he'd seen earlier was gone, replaced by an impenetrable wall of devotion to Julian. Arthur, his body screaming, his mind cold and clear, retrieved his blazer. The weight of the recording device in his pocket felt like a promise. He had endured, he had suffered, and now he had the truth. Julian's words, Seraphina's blindness, his own humiliation. All of it was meticulously documented. He was still the silent shadow, but he was also the collector of secrets, biding his time. The reckoning, indeed, was growing closer, and when it came, it would be devastating. The scent of freshly baked cake, sweet and intoxicating, filled the sprawling, minimalist kitchen of Seraphina Thorne's penthouse apartment. Arthur Stone, his movements precise and practiced, carefully placed a delicate sugar rose onto the last cupcake. It was Lily's favorite vanilla bean with strawberry cream. Today, in another life, was her birthday. Here, in this gilded cage, it was merely another task, disguised as a gesture of affection for the woman who, for 5 long years, had unknowingly held his freedom captive. Seraphina entered, her sharp, analytical gaze sweeping across the array of pastries. She paused, a flicker of something unreadable in her cool eyes. "What's all this, Arthur?" Her voice was crisp, betraying neither curiosity nor warmth, merely a detached inquiry. He turned, offering a small, practiced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I thought, since we're engaged now, a small celebration. For us." The lie tasted like ash, but his expression remained perfectly composed. He watched her, a silent observer of her discomfort. This was the Seraphina Arthur knew. The successful CEO, unyielding in business, but emotionally guarded and profoundly obtuse when it came to genuine human connection, especially anything outside the narrative she'd carefully constructed around Julian Blackwood. Her inability to see past the surface, even now, was a core that fueled Arthur's quiet contempt. Seraphina raised an eyebrow, a hint of disdain. "A celebration? For us?" The way she emphasized us made it sound like an unpleasant chore. "Arthur, you know I don't care for such frivolous displays. And Julian, he's still not well." Her voice softened imperceptibly when she spoke Julian's name, a stark contrast to her tone with Arthur. The mention of Julian, as always, acted as a shield, deflecting any nascent emotion Arthur's carefully orchestrated charade might have sparked. It was a familiar pattern, one that simultaneously angered and reassured Arthur. Anger at her continued blindness, reassurance that his act was still impenetrable. "Of course," Arthur said, his smile unwavering, "but perhaps a small gesture of appreciation for all you've done, and to mark the occasion." He pushed a plate of cupcakes toward her, his gaze unwavering. "I made your favorite, too." Lemon meringue. She hesitated, her gaze briefly meeting his. There was a moment, a fleeting fraction of a second, where her perfect composure seemed to crack. Was it surprise? Confusion? A hint of reluctant curiosity? The smallest shift, but Arthur, ever vigilant, noticed. He had seen it before, these tiny tremors in her carefully constructed facade. They were the cracks through which a new, unsettling reality might one day seep in for her. This was the burgeoning of Seraphina's internal conflict. Her pride and stubborn loyalty to Julian warring with the insidious, unwanted warmth that Arthur's calculated kindness occasionally stirred. She picked up a lemon meringue cupcake, her fingers brushing the delicate, toasted peaks. Her lips, usually set in a firm line, softened almost imperceptibly as she took a bite. The faint scent of citrus and sweet cream filled the air. "It's good," she admitted, her voice lower than before, a grudging acknowledgement. "But don't make a habit of it. We have more pressing matters than confections." She put the cupcake down, the momentary lapse in her armor vanishing as swiftly as it appeared. "Julian is feeling particularly fragile. I need to focus on him." Arthur simply nodded, retrieving the half-eaten cupcake. "Understood, Seraphina. My apologies for presuming." His eyes, however, held a hidden flicker of triumph. Task complete. Her fleeting softness, a tiny victory. He watched her leave, the scent of vanilla and lemon mingling with the lingering scent of her expensive perfume. Fragile, he thought, a cold smirk playing on his lips. Asterisk, he's always fragile when he needs something from you. Asterisk, the system, as if on cue, buzzed subtly in his mind. Asterisk, task 99.5. Provide emotional support to Seraphina during a moment of distress. Duration 1 hour. Reward 1 system point. Asterisk, Arthur sighed, a weariness seeping into his bones that no amount of acting could disguise. He was alone in the quiet hum of the apartment, the fake birthday celebration for the ghost of Lily now a cold memory. He felt a perverse satisfaction in the constant reminders of Seraphina's blind spot, the gaping hole in her perception that Julian exploited so masterfully. It made his own cruelty, his own calculated deception, feel justified. Later that week, the system's next demand manifested with dramatic urgency. He was walking with Seraphina through a bustling art gallery, a mandatory outing she'd arranged to network, and for which Arthur served as an elegantly silent accessory. Her attention, as always, was divided between her phone and a condescending art critic. Arthur's eyes, however, were on the precarious installation of a massive, abstract sculpture suspended precariously above them. A sudden, sharp crack echoed through the gallery. A support beam, seemingly weakened, groaned ominously. Panic rippled through the crowd. Seraphina, distracted, was directly beneath the descending metal frame. Her phone slipped from her hand, her eyes widening in slow-motion horror as the shadow of twisted steel grew. Arthur didn't hesitate. It wasn't love, nor even instinct born of genuine concern for her. It was the system, a cold directive blazing in his mind. Asterisk, task 99. 5 activated. Ensure Seraphina's physical safety. Asterisk, he moved like a blur, a sudden surge of strength coursing through him. With a powerful shove, he pushed Seraphina out of the direct path of the falling sculpture. The impact of the displaced air, the screech of metal, and the terrified gasps of the onlookers filled the space. The sculpture crashed to the marble floor, narrowly missing them both, fragments of plaster and metal scattering like shrapnel. Seraphina stumbled, falling against Arthur's chest. She was trembling, her face pale, her breath coming in ragged gasps. For the first time, Arthur felt the raw, unadulterated fear emanating from her, not the controlled anger or dismissive indifference he was accustomed to. She looked up at him, her eyes wide and disoriented. "Arthur, you saved me." Her voice was barely a whisper, a stark contrast to her usual confident tone. Her carefully constructed facade had shattered, revealing a vulnerable, shaken woman. He held her, his arms still around her, a protective gesture that felt disturbingly natural even to him. Are you all right, Seraphina? His voice was calm, steady, designed to soothe. His internal monologue, however, was a frantic tally. Asterisk system points accumulating. The task is being fulfilled. Asterisk, but there was also an uncomfortable shift within him, a fleeting recognition of the primal fear he had just witnessed in her. He pushed it down. It was irrelevant. The gallery staff rushed over, a flurry of apologies and concern. Seraphina, still leaning heavily on Arthur, slowly regained her composure. Her vulnerability, however, lingered. She didn't immediately pull away. Her hand, usually so firm and decisive, found his, clutching it for a moment, as if seeking an anchor. I think so. Thank you, Arthur. There was an unusual softness in her gaze, a profound gratitude that made his carefully constructed indifference waver for a millisecond. This was for her, a moment of pure, unadulterated human connection and gratitude, eroding her self-imposed emotional walls. She was genuinely touched, genuinely grateful, and it was a foreign, unsettling feeling for her to owe Arthur so much. Later that evening, after the adrenaline had subsided and they were back in the penthouse, Seraphina seemed different, quieter. She'd even suggested he take the evening off from cooking, something unheard of. Arthur had merely smiled, a subtle nod, accepting her unexpected reprieve. He knew what this meant. He knew the seeds of doubt, of a new, unsettling emotion, were beginning to sprout in her carefully cultivated emotional wasteland. He hated it. He hated having to be her hero, to touch her, to be the recipient of her nascent gratitude. It made him feel complicit. Just as Arthur thought he might finally get a moment of peace, his phone buzzed. It was Seraphina. A text message, short and chilling. Asterisk Julian just called. He said he can't live without me. He's going to do something drastic. Asterisk Arthur's jaw tightened. Julian. Always Julian. The architect of Seraphina's emotional chaos. The puppeteer of her affections. This was the ultimate of Julian. His vile, manipulative tactics, preying on Seraphina's misplaced loyalty and compassion. Arthur could almost hear the rehearsed sob in Julian's voice, the theatrical tremor designed to wring guilt and panic from Seraphina. He knew, with a sickening certainty, that this was another one of Julian's elaborate schemes, designed to reassert his control, to remind Seraphina of her duty to him, especially after her unnerving brush with mortality and Arthur's unexpected heroism. Seraphina rushed out of the apartment, a whirlwind of panic and guilt, leaving Arthur standing in the silent aftermath. He knew he couldn't intervene. His role was to observe, to complete his tasks, to ensure his own freedom, not to save Seraphina from her own self-destructive choices. His true revenge was imminent. The next morning, Seraphina returned, her face etched with exhaustion and unshed tears. She looked directly at Arthur, her eyes clouded with an unbearable weight. Arthur, she began, her voice hoarse. I can't go through with this engagement. Arthur felt a surge of cold satisfaction, carefully masked by a look of profound, albeit manufactured, sadness. He had known this was coming. Julian's theatrics had worked, as they always did. It was the predictable cycle of Seraphina's life, a cycle Arthur was about to shatter. Is it Julian? Arthur asked, his voice low, laced with a feigned resignation that twisted his gut. He threatened to harm himself again, didn't he? He didn't need to ask. He knew the play by heart. Seraphina flinched, her eyes dropping. He needs me, Arthur. He's unwell. He can't cope without me. I have to be there for him. Her tone was defensive, a desperate attempt to justify her decision to herself, to protect the fragile illusion of Julian's victimhood. This was her deepest, surfacing, her inability to see Julian for the predator he was, her self-sacrificing blind spot that led her to continually choose pain over liberation. Arthur nodded slowly, as if processing a devastating blow. I understand, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. If that's what you truly believe is best for Julian. He let the words hang in the air, a subtle, almost imperceptible jab. He made sure his gaze conveyed profound disappointment, a perfectly calibrated expression of a man whose heart had just been broken. The lie was seamless. Inside, he was celebrating. Finally, Seraphina looked up, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. She had expected anger, an argument, perhaps even tears. Not this quiet, accepting sorrow. Her guilt, palpable, intensified. "I'm sorry, Arthur. I truly am. I know this is unfair to you." He stepped closer, his hand reaching out, then hesitating, as if battling an internal struggle between grief and propriety. Finally, he gently took her hand, his thumb brushing her knuckles. "Seraphina, if our path together is not meant to be," he said, his voice thick with a carefully constructed emotion, "then at least let me fulfill my final promise to you." He squeezed her hand, his gaze unwavering, full of a counterfeit nobility. "Let's expedite Julian's surgery. Let me do this for him. It's the least I can do." Seraphina stared at him, her mouth slightly agape. His selfless offer after everything shocked her. The guilt in her eyes morphed into something akin to awe, mixed with confusion. She'd expected him to be furious, to argue, to disappear. Not this grand, heartbreaking gesture of altruism. He was still the man who had cooked for her, who had saved her life. He was the man she had taken for granted, and now he was offering the ultimate sacrifice for her true love. This act of seemingly profound selflessness, designed to complete his system task, served as another powerful, for Seraphina, deepening her internal struggle and making her future awakening all the more potent. It shattered her perception of him as merely a convenient fixture in her life. "Arthur, you don't have to," she stammered, shaking her head. He smiled, a sad, knowing smile. "I do. For you, Seraphina. Let me do this. Please." His eyes pleaded, but his internal voice was screaming with triumph. This is it. The final step. Freedom. She finally nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "Okay, Arthur. Whatever you wish." She didn't understand the depth of her concession, the true meaning behind his wish. She simply saw the magnanimity of a man whose heart she'd just broken, offering to save the life of her beloved. The arrangements for the surgery were made swiftly. Arthur, ever efficient, ensured every detail was meticulously handled. He was leaving nothing to chance. He was on the precipice of his freedom, on the verge of bringing Lily back. The day before the scheduled surgery, Arthur packed a small bag. He had left no personal belongings in the penthouse, no trace of the 5 years he had spent living a lie. As he stood by the door, ready to walk out of Seraphina's life for good, he paused. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the small, sleek recording pen he had used to capture Julian's damning confessions. He had held onto it, a potent symbol of his meticulously planned revenge. He walked back to Seraphina's study, a room where she spent countless hours working, a room that represented her fiercely independent and intelligent side, a side that Julian, in his manipulative way, sought to undermine. He placed the pen carefully on her polished mahogany desk, right next to a framed photo of her and Julian smiling, an image of manufactured bliss. He stood there for a moment, looking at the pen, then at the photo. His true motive, his raw, unyielding desire for vengeance against Julian, against Seraphina's blind cruelty, surged through him. This was not a gift of love, not a parting sentiment. This was the fuse. This was the culmination of 5 years of humiliation, 5 years of playing the docile, devoted fiancé. This was his final, most insidious act of rebellion against the system, against Seraphina, and against Julian. It was of Arthur's cold, calculating nature, a parting shot designed to ensure that even in his death, he would wreak havoc on the lives of those who had wronged him. He turned, not looking back, and walked out of the penthouse. The door clicked shut behind him, sealing a chapter of his life. The reckoning was not just coming. It was already set in motion. He left Seraphina not with a final farewell, but with a bomb, ticking silently on her desk, waiting for her to discover the devastating truth. The sterile scent of disinfectant filled Arthur's nostrils, a stark contrast to the intoxicating scent of Lily's memory that filled his mind. Above him, the harsh glare of operating room lights seemed to bless rather than blind. The surgeon's masked face was a blur, the quiet beeps of machines a symphony of his impending liberation. 5 years. 5 years of feigning devotion, of enduring humiliation, of living a lie so meticulously crafted it had almost consumed him. But now it was done. The system's cold, metallic voice resonated directly in his consciousness, cutting through the haze of anesthetic. Asterisk, task 100 completed. Heart donation successful. Host entity Arthur Stone has fulfilled all contractual obligations. Revival protocol initiated for Lily Evergreen. Farewell, host entity. Your journey in this realm concludes. Asterisk, a profound sense of peace, sharper than any surgical blade, washed over him. He felt his body growing heavy, a fading sensation as if his essence was drawing away, pulling free from the confines of this existence, from this world where he was merely a tool. A ghost of a smile touched his lips, a genuine one for the first time in what felt like an eternity. He wasn't just dying, he was going home. He was going to Lily. His vision dimmed, the sound softened, and with a final, joyful whisper of Lily's name, Arthur Stone ceased to exist in Seraphina Thorne's world. In the pristine, yet suffocating, waiting room, Seraphina Thorne paced. Her designer heels clicked a frantic rhythm against the polished marble floor. Her phone lay abandoned on a plush velvet chair. Ignored. She hadn't been able to focus on work all day. A cold knot of anxiety tightened in her stomach, an unfamiliar sensation. This wasn't about Julian. Julian was fine. He would get his heart, he would recover. This was about Arthur. A strange, unsettling worry had gnawed at her since he'd left that morning. His quiet acquiescence, the almost serene look in his eyes, had been unnerving. For 5 years, he had been a constant, irritating presence, a shadow she took for granted. He was the one who adored her, who clung to her every word, whose love she casually wielded as a weapon or a shield. Yet, in their final moments, he hadn't clung. He hadn't begged. He had simply accepted. Asterisk, why did that bother her so much? Asterisk, she ran a hand through her perfectly styled hair. It was ridiculous. He was a nuisance she was finally rid of. He had served his purpose. A pang, sharp and unexpected, pierced her. No, not a nuisance. He'd been there, always there. The one who made her coffee, who remembered her obscure preferences, who never challenged her, no matter how cruelly she spoke. Julian, for all his charms, was always absent, always demanding. Arthur, though a perpetual shadow, was always present. The memory of the recording pen, lying innocently on her desk back home, flickered in her mind. What gift had he spoken of? A final, desperate attempt to win her over? A last, pathetic testament of his undying devotion? She scoffed, but the anxiety didn't abate. Her heart, usually a fortress of ice, felt strangely exposed. The double doors of the waiting room swung open. Dr. Eris, the lead surgeon, walked out, his face etched with a gravity that made Seraphina's blood run cold. She straightened, her usual imperious mask firmly in place, but inside, a tremor began. Dr. Eris, she began, her voice steady. Is Julian? The doctor shook his head slowly, his gaze falling to the floor before meeting hers again. Miss Thorne, Julian Blackwood's surgery was a success. The transplant went smoothly. He's stable and recovering. A wave of relief washed over her, so potent it almost buckled her knees. Thank God, she whispered, a genuine, heartfelt thanks. Julian was safe, her perfect, fragile Julian. But then, Dr. Eris's expression darkened further. He took a deep breath, his next words shattering the fragile peace. However, I'm so terribly sorry to inform you, Miss Thorne, Arthur Stone. He didn't make it. The world tilted. The air in her lungs solidified. What? The word was a mere breath, a disbelieving gasp. No, no, that's impossible. He's strong. He was fine. Miss Thorne, Mr. Stone had a rare, undiagnosed cardiac condition that went into acute failure during the procedure. Despite our best efforts, we couldn't resuscitate him. The doctor's voice was gentle, regretful. He passed away on the operating table. My deepest condolences. The world spun faster, colors blurring. Arthur passed away? The words echoed hollow and meaningless. Asterisk no. This isn't how it was supposed to go. Asterisk he was supposed to recover, to eventually move on, to leave her alone. He wasn't supposed to die. You're lying. The shriek ripped from her throat, raw and guttural, unlike any sound she'd ever made. He can't be dead. He was just here. She lunged forward, grabbing Dr. Eris's white coat, her elegant hands trembling violently. Do something. Bring him back. He needs more time. You're doctors, aren't you? You save lives. Her carefully constructed facade crumbled, revealing a woman on the verge of hysteria. Tears, hot and blinding, streamed down her face, blurring the doctor's sympathetic expression. She didn't even realize she was crying. This wasn't Julian she was begging for. This was Arthur. Miss Thorne, I'm truly sorry, Dr. Eris said, gently disengaging himself. We did everything we could. There was nothing more to be done. Nothing more to be done. Arthur was gone. Irrevocably, permanently. A tidal wave of memories crashed over her. Arthur, fetching her coat in the rain, soaked to the bone but smiling. Arthur, enduring Julian's sneers without a word, his eyes only on her. Arthur, cooking her favorite obscure dish for her birthday, a detail she'd mentioned only once. Arthur, calling her my love, even when she bitingly told him to stop. Arthur, looking at her with an unwavering devotion she had systematically crushed, ridiculed, and taken for granted. Asterisk he loved me. Asterisk the realization hit her with the force of a physical blow, stealing her breath, emptying her lungs. Not the superficial adoration Julian craved, but a deep, unyielding, unconditional love. A love she had repaid with scorn, with cruelty, with 5 years of unimaginable torment. And he's gone. Her knees buckled. The polished marble floor rushed up to meet her. A guttural sob tore through her chest, a sound of pure, unadulterated agony and regret. Her perfect life, her controlled world, shattered into a million pieces. She saw his face, calm and accepting as he went into surgery, a face she had dismissed as pathetic. Now she understood. He wasn't pathetic. He was noble. He had given his heart, literally, for her chosen love. He had sacrificed himself, and she had been too blind, too selfish, too utterly consumed by her fantasy of Julian to see the truth until it was too late. Arthur! She choked out, her voice barely audible through her sobs. Arthur, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. The words were meaningless now. They couldn't bring him back. They couldn't undo the years of pain she'd inflicted. The nuisance was gone, and with him, a part of herself she hadn't known existed, a part that had, against all odds, grown to love him. Her slot point of blindly loving the wrong man and hurting the right one had exploded into an irreversible tragedy. Hours later, she stumbled back into her luxurious penthouse, a shell of her former self. Her eyes were swollen, her throat raw, her designer clothes disheveled. The apartment felt vast and empty, echoing with a silence that screamed Arthur's absence. Every corner held a phantom memory of him. The spot where he always left her morning coffee, the kitchen where he cooked, the study where he meticulously organized her papers. Her gaze fell on her desk. The small, sleek recording pen lay exactly where Arthur had placed it. A parting gift, he had said. Something to remember me by. A sick, bitter laugh escaped her lips. Asterisk remember him by. As if she could ever forget. Asterisk she picked up the pen, her fingers trembling. Felt cold, innocuous. What could it possibly contain? A love confession? A final, desperate plea? She pressed the play button, half expecting a tearful declaration. Instead, Julian's voice filled the room. Not the soft, charming voice he used with her, but a sneering, arrogant tone, laced with malice. Idiot. She believes every word. Arthur is so easy to manipulate. Seraphina's devotion to me is unshakable, thanks to his pathetic existence. She'll never question me, not while she has him to blame for everything. The voice continued, recounting years of calculated lies, of fabricated ailments, of staging accidents to make Arthur look bad, of feigning distress to manipulate Seraphina's affections and wealth. He even bragged about how he'd coerced Arthur into the heart donation, mocking Seraphina's blind love for him. She's a fool. Really? Julian's voice concluded, dripping with contempt. A beautiful, rich fool, completely wrapped around my finger. And now, thanks to Arthur's generous, unwilling sacrifice, I'll be set for life. I don't even have to pretend to be sick anymore. Arthur really was a convenient idiot. The recording ended. The silence that followed was deafening, suffocating. Seraphina stood frozen, the pen slipping from her numb fingers. It clattered to the floor, a tiny, insignificant sound in the colossal ruin of her life. Her grief, so raw and all-consuming moments before, transformed, twisted into something cold, hard, and terrifying. Julian. A cold, calculating resolve settled over her. Julian Blackwood thought he was set for life. He thought he had won. He thought he could walk away from this, laughing at her stupidity. He had underestimated her. He had underestimated the storm he had just unleashed. The grieving, heartbroken woman vanished, replaced by Seraphina Thorne, the ruthless CEO, the woman who built an empire, the woman who never tolerated betrayal. Her hands clenched into fists, nails digging into her palms. Julian Blackwood, she whispered, her voice dangerously calm, devoid of all emotion but icy rage. You just sealed your own fate, and you have no idea what's coming. The system's voice, a detached whisper he hadn't heard in 5 years, resonated within him, devoid of emotion, yet carrying the weight of his ultimate victory. A shaky, joyous laugh escaped him, half-sob. He was free. He had done it. Lily was alive. He stumbled out of bed, adrenaline surging through his veins, propelling him towards the door. He didn't know how or where or when, but Lily had to be here. The system wouldn't revive her only to hide her. He burst into the small living room, then the kitchen, his heart hammering against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat of hope. Empty. A note on the fridge. His hands trembled as he snatched it. Simple, handwritten in a delicate script he recognized from his dreams. Yet it wasn't Lily's. It was from his sister, Sarah. Arthur, so glad you're awake. Doctors said you were in a coma for a few days. Don't worry, I brought your friend home. She's resting in the guest room. Be gentle, she's a little confused. Love, Sarah. A coma? A few days? Felt like an eternity. And his friend? A cold dread began to seep into the cracks of his elation. He strode to the guest room, every fiber of his being vibrating with anticipation and a growing, sickening fear. He pushed the door open slowly, his breath catching in his throat. There she was, Lily. She lay curled on the bed, blankets drawn up to her chin. Her fair hair fanned across the pillow like a halo. Her face, so achingly familiar, so perfectly etched in his memory, was peaceful, youthful, just as he remembered her before the accident. He sank to his knees beside the bed, tears blurring his vision. He reached out a trembling hand, reverently tracing the curve of her cheek, a ghost of a touch. Her eyelids fluttered open. Azure eyes, those windows to his soul, met his. A gentle smile touched his lips, a lifetime of love and sacrifice pouring into his gaze. Lily, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. You're back, my Lily. Her brow furrowed. She blinked slowly, her gaze searching his, devoid of recognition. Hello? She said, her voice soft, tentative. Who are you? And why are you crying? The word amnesia screamed in his mind, echoing the system's cruel interpretation of revival. It had brought back her body, her life, but not her memories. Not them. The joy, the relief, the triumphant surge of freedom evaporated, leaving behind an abyss of despair so vast it threatened to swallow him whole. 5 years. 5 years of feigning love for Seraphina, enduring Julian's manipulations, sacrificing his dignity, his very heart. All for this? To be a stranger to the only woman he had ever loved? His breath hitched, turning into a painful gasp. He lurched backward, away from the bed, away from the innocent, vacant gaze that held no trace of his existence. He stumbled out of the room, blindly pushing past his sister, who had just returned with groceries. He didn't hear her startled cry, didn't feel the brush of her hand. He needed to escape, to sever the connection to this unbearable reality. The apartment felt suffocating, every object a mocking reminder of the future he had just lost. He found himself in the bathroom, staring at his reflection. Gaunt, hollow-eyed, a ghost of the man he once was, and now a ghost to the woman he loved. The mirror reflected a defeated soldier, his war won, his prize snatched away at the last moment. The knife he used to shave lay on the counter, glinting innocently under the harsh light. A single, dark thought bloomed in the barren landscape of his despair. What was the point? Why endure all that, only to return to this agonizing void? Lily was alive, yes, but their Lily, the one who loved him, who understood him, was gone forever. His hand reached for the cold steel, his fingers closing around the handle. His mind raced, replaying every humiliation, every silent tear, every fake smile. It had all been for her, and now, nothing. He raised the knife, his gaze fixed on his reflection, a grim resolve hardening his features. This was the only way to truly be free, to join the Lily he remembered, wherever she might be. A soft knock, then the creak of the door. She stood in the doorway, clutching a small, worn photo album to her chest. His photo album. She looked at him with wide, confused eyes, her gaze falling on the knife, then back to his face. There was no fear, only a profound bewilderment. I found this on your bedside table, she said, her voice barely a whisper. There's a picture in here of us. We look so happy. She held it up, a snapshot of them years ago, laughing, his arm around her. I don't remember this, but I feel something when I look at it. A warmth. She paused, her eyes locking onto his. You said you were my Arthur. Is this us? She didn't remember him, not truly. The memories were gone, perhaps forever. But she was there. She was alive. And in her eyes, despite the blankness, there was a flicker of something, a nascent curiosity, a yearning for connection, a fragile echo of the warmth he remembered. The knife slipped from his numb fingers, clattering onto the tiled floor. The abyss of despair receded, replaced by a tiny, trembling spark. It wasn't the reunion he had envisioned, not the blissful, tearful embrace of a love rekindled. It was a new beginning, a new challenge, a different kind of pain. But it was hope. He had brought her back from the brink of death. He could bring her back from the brink of oblivion. Arthur slowly sank to his knees, not in despair, but in a profound, agonizing determination. He looked at Lily, truly looked at her, beautiful, confused, yet undeniably present. Yes, Lily? He rasped, tears streaming down his face, not of sorrow now, but of fierce, renewed resolve. That's us, and I'm going to make you remember every single moment. His 5 years of sacrifice had brought her here. Now he would spend a lifetime making her his again. The path was agonizingly clear, yet brutally steep. His new mission had begun. The world shimmered into existence around Seraphina Thorne, a disorienting kaleidoscope of unfamiliar streets and faces. The system, a cold, clinical voice in her mind, had transported her, just as Arthur's had once bound him. Her new mission echoed the old, a cruel irony, but the objective was starkly different. Make Arthur Stone love you again. Regret, a bitter bile in her throat, was her constant companion now, a self-inflicted wound she carried into this new reality. She found him quickly, drawn by an invisible thread woven from years of their intertwined, fractured fates. He was in a small, cozy cafe, his back to her, watching a woman with bright, hopeful eyes across the room. Lily Evergreen. Seraphina's breath hitched. Lily was as Arthur had described her, pure and gentle, the ghost that had haunted their 5 years, the woman who had cost Arthur everything. Seraphina approached, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. "Arthur," she whispered, her voice rough with unshed tears and years of silent torment. He stiffened, every muscle in his lean frame going rigid. When he turned, his deep-set eyes, once pools of feigned affection, were now shards of ice. There was no recognition of their shared past, no flicker of the tormented lover she had known. Only an unyielding, palpable disdain. "Seraphina," he said, her name a foreign, unwelcome sound on his lips. His voice, once subtly modulated to soothe her, was now stripped bare, raw with an emotion she hadn't anticipated. Pure, unadulterated indifference. "You're here." It wasn't a question, but a bitter observation. I had to find you," she stammered, extending a hand, which he pointedly ignored. "Arthur, I'm so sorry. About everything. Julian, the heart. I know now. I know what I did, what he was." A mirthless chuckle escaped him, sharp and cutting. "You know, Seraphina? You think you know? You know nothing. You saw what you wanted to see, believed what you wanted to believe. And I let you, because I had to." His gaze flickered towards Lily, then back to Seraphina, a cold, hard shield descending over his face. "Let me make this clear, since your system apparently didn't. I never loved you. Not a single moment of those 5 years. Every smile, every touch, every act of kindness was a lie, a means to an end, an act to save the woman I truly loved, and still do." The words struck her like physical blows, each syllable a hammer shattering the fragile hope she dared to nurture. Her chest ached, a pain far more profound than any physical wound. "No," she breathed, shaking her head, tears finally overflowing. "You can't mean that. There were moments. I felt it. You felt it. You felt your own delusion," Arthur retorted, his voice unwavering, devoid of any warmth. "I felt nothing but disgust and a burning desire for it all to end so I could get back to her." He gestured subtly towards Lily, who was now laughing at something her companion had said, a bright, unrestrained sound that pierced Seraphina's soul. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have something real to pursue." He turned his back on her, his dismissal absolute, and walked determinedly towards Lily's table. Seraphina stood frozen, the harsh fluorescent lights of the cafe suddenly too bright, the murmur of other patrons too loud. Her system's voice chimed, a cruel reminder. Asterisk task update. Subject Arthur Stone has displayed extreme negative sentiment. Progress 0%. Asterisk. Arthur, meanwhile, approached Lily and her companion, a man with an easy smile and eyes that lingered on Lily a little too long. His name, Arthur had learned from discreet inquiries, was Kevin Davis, a new colleague of Lily's at the local library, and he was clearly smitten. "Lily?" Arthur said, his voice softer now, a stark contrast to the venom he'd just spat at Seraphina. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Lily looked up, her smile brightening further. "Arthur, what a surprise." "Kevin, this is Arthur." "Arthur, this is Kevin Davis, a new colleague. He's been incredibly helpful with the new digital archiving system." Kevin extended a hand, his smile unwavering, though a hint of possessiveness flickered in his eyes. "Pleasure to meet you, Arthur. Lily speaks highly of you." "Likewise," Arthur replied, his grip firm, a subtle warning in his touch. He felt a primal surge of protectiveness, a fierce jealousy he hadn't known since Lily's disappearance. This man, with his charming smile and genuine interest, was a threat, a very real, very present threat to his carefully constructed plan, to his future with Lily. He had fought through hell to get her back, only to find another man vying for her attention, and Lily, in her amnesia, was oblivious to the high stakes. "I just finished my shift," Lily said, her eyes sparkling. "I was just telling Kevin about that amazing starry night we saw at the observatory. You remember, Arthur? When you thought you saw a shooting star that wasn't there." A pang of bittersweet memory hit Arthur. It was a fabrication, a story he'd spun to bring a smile to her face during one of their dates in the old world. A desperate attempt to imprint happy moments on her subconscious, hoping they'd carry over. Now it was just a story. "Of course," he managed, his voice a little hoarse. "That was a good night." Kevin chuckled. "Sounds romantic. I'm a bit of an astronomy buff myself, Lily. Perhaps we could go to the new planetarium sometime? They have an incredible 3D star projection." Arthur's jaw tightened. Kevin wasn't just being friendly. He was making his move. And Lily, innocent and open, was responding with genuine warmth. Arthur had been the pursuer for so long, the one pulling strings, manipulating events. Now he was merely one man among others, desperate to win back the heart of a woman who didn't remember loving him. The dynamic had completely shifted. He was no longer the master strategist. He was just Arthur, terrified of losing Lily again, this time to a rival who had a clean slate. "Lily, I was actually hoping we could spend some time together today," Arthur interjected smoothly, forcing a smile he didn't feel. "I found that old photo album you mentioned, from your childhood. Thought we could look through it together." He knew it was a cheap shot using her past, but he couldn't afford to be subtle. Lily's eyes widened. "Oh, Arthur, that would be wonderful. I've been so curious about my early memories." She turned to Kevin, a hint of regret in her expression. "I'm so sorry, Kevin. Maybe another time." Kevin's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but he quickly recovered. "Of course, Lily. No problem at all. Family comes first. Perhaps tomorrow." "Perhaps," Lily said, but her attention was already fixed on Arthur. As Arthur steered Lily away, he glanced back. Seraphina was gone, but Kevin's gaze, sharp and assessing, followed them until they exited the cafe. The battle, Arthur realized, had just begun. He had won Lily back from the clutches of death, but he still had to win her heart, her memories, and her future, from a world that kept throwing new obstacles in his path. And now, Seraphina was here, a constant, unwelcome reminder of the price he'd paid, a living testament to his past deceptions. He had escaped one system, only to be plunged into another, far more personal and perhaps more agonizing game. The hunter had become the hunted, and the prize was still agonizingly out of reach. The biting winter air carried the scent of pine and cinnamon through the bustling city streets, a festive facade that did little to warm the chill in Arthur Stone's chest. Today was Christmas Eve, and more importantly, it was the day he planned to give Lily Evergreen a memory to replace the one she'd lost. He'd meticulously planned a surprise for her at the city's annual winter fair, a recreation of a small, forgotten Christmas market they'd visited years ago, complete with a particular spiced tea she loved. His heart, once a hollow chamber of sacrifice and resolve, now pulsed with a fragile hope, a beacon that had guided him through 5 years of meticulously crafted lies and agonizing pretense. Every twinkle light, every carolers song, felt like a note in the symphony of his impending reunion with the real Lily. He found her by the entrance to the fair, her face alight with innocent wonder at the glittering stalls. The sight alone brought an ache to his throat, a pang of fierce, protective love. He walked towards her, a small, velvet-wrapped gift tucked into his coat pocket, a charm bracelet, each charm representing a shared memory he hoped would jog her amnesia. Seraphina Thorne, ever present, ever watchful, hovered a discreet distance away, her own expression a complicated mosaic of regret and longing. She had become a shadow, a persistent, unwelcome echo of a past he desperately wanted to erase. He ignored her, as he always did, his gaze fixed solely on Lily. As Arthur reached for Lily's hand, a sudden, piercing creak split the joyous cacophony of the fair. High above them, the massive central Christmas tree, adorned with thousands of lights and oversized ornaments, swayed precariously. A gust of wind, stronger than any before, ripped through the square, snapping one of the guide wires with a violent crack. Time seemed to slow. The monstrous spruce began its slow, inevitable topple, directly towards Lily. A choked scream rose from the crowd, instantly swallowed by the impending doom. Arthur didn't think, he reacted. His entire being screamed, "Lily!" Every fiber of his exhausted, tortured soul propelled him forward, his only goal to shield her, to complete the sacred, torturous mission that had defined his existence. But before he could reach her, a blur of dark fabric shot past him. Seraphina. She launched herself, not at Lily, but directly into the path of the falling tree, a desperate, guttural cry escaping her lips. "Arthur!" Her slender frame, once so formidable and haughty, collided with the thick trunk of the tree just as it began its descent. The impact was sickeningly loud, a sickening thud followed by the splintering crack of wood and a collective gasp from the horrified onlookers. The tree, momentarily impeded, angled its fall just enough to crash not on Lily, but beside her, pinning Seraphina beneath its lower branches, her body twisted at an unnatural angle. The world went silent, then exploded into chaos. Screams, frantic shouts, the blaring of approaching sirens. Arthur froze, a half step from Lily, his outstretched hand still suspended in the air. Seraphina lay crumpled, blood blooming on the pristine white snow, her eyes wide, staring directly at him. Her last conscious act had been to intercept the blow, a desperate, misguided attempt to protect him, the man who had only ever feigned love for her. A cold knot twisted in Arthur's gut. This was not part of the plan. This was not how Seraphina was supposed to fade from his life. This act of selfless, reckless devotion was a stark, undeniable contrast to the cruel, demanding woman he'd known for 5 years. It was a wrench in the gears of his carefully constructed hatred, a dissonant chord in his triumphant symphony. Lily, pale and trembling, was pulled to safety by a bystander, her eyes wide with terror, but physically unharmed. Arthur, however, couldn't tear his gaze from Seraphina. Rescuers swarmed, prying at the heavy branches, their faces grim. When they finally lifted the immense weight, Seraphina's body was limp, her breathing shallow, a grotesque smear of crimson marring her elegant profile. Hours later, the sterile hum of the hospital room was a stark contrast to the festive fare. Seraphina lay in intensive care, her injuries severe, multiple fractures, internal bleeding, her life hanging by a thread. Arthur sat in the waiting area, Lily clinging to his arm, still shaken. He felt nothing but a profound, unnerving emptiness. Her sacrifice had been for him, not for Lily, yet it had inadvertently saved Lily from further trauma. It was a cruel irony, a final, twisted testament to her desperate affection. He told himself it changed nothing. His mission remained Lily, but the image of her body crumpling, her final, protective gaze, burrowed deep into a corner of his heart he thought had been permanently walled off. It was a weakness, a distraction he couldn't afford. When Lily's fear had somewhat subsided, her gaze met Arthur's, full of a newfound vulnerability and trust. "Arthur," she began, her voice barely a whisper. Who was that woman? And why did she do that?" The question was a gift, an opening he'd waited years for, but the context was agonizing. He looked at her, truly looked at her, the woman he had resurrected, the anchor of his sanity through years of hell. This was his chance to break free, to fully claim their shared future. "Lily," he began, his voice rough with emotion he hadn't allowed himself to express in so long. "Her name is Seraphina, and what she did, it's part of a story. A long, terrible story I need to tell you." He took her hands, tracing the lines on her palm, his thumbs gently caressing her skin. "5 years ago, I made a deal with a system that promised to bring you back to me after your accident. The price was everything. 5 years of my life, spent under Seraphina's command, pretending to be her boyfriend, completing tasks, enduring humiliation, all to gather enough love energy to activate the resurrection protocol. He saw the confusion, then the dawning horror in her eyes. He pressed on, his voice gaining strength, each word a hammer blow against the walls of his own past pain. Every moment I spent with her, every gentle word, every forced smile, every time I let her humiliate me for Julian, it was all a performance, a meticulously planned charade for you. She was the vessel for my punishment, the tool for my redemption. She believed I loved her. She believed the tasks were for her benefit. But every single one was a step closer to you, Lily. Every single one was a measure of my devotion, my agony, for your return. His gaze locked with hers, raw and unfiltered. The final task was to donate my heart to Julian, her true love. I was supposed to die in her world so I could be reborn in ours. The recording pen I gave her, the one that exposed Julian's treachery, that wasn't a gift of love, Lily. It was my final act of vengeance, a calculated strike to dismantle her world as I exited it. I needed her to hate Julian, to understand the depths of his deceit, so she would not mourn me in vain. And when she discovered the truth, when she saw what Julian truly was, she would be consumed by rage and regret. It was my bitter, final payment for 5 years of enduring her blind cruelty. Lily gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. Arthur, that's impossible. You suffered so much. For me, her voice trembled, a mixture of disbelief and profound empathy. She might not remember why she was so important to him, but she felt the weight of his sacrifice, the enormity of his love. Her fingers tightened around his, an instinctive gesture of comfort and protection. And she thought you loved her? My God, Arthur. He nodded, a single tear finally escaping his own eye, tracing a path through the dust of his endurance. Yes, she did. And that's why she's here, in our world now. The system bound her to, sent her after me. Her task is to make me fall in love with her, to make me forget you, to replace you. He looked into her eyes, pleading for understanding, for the recognition that was slowly dawning. But there's nothing for her to replace, Lily, because there was never anyone but you. My love for you, it wasn't just true. It was the only truth. It was the only thing that kept me alive, kept me sane, kept me fighting through every single second of those 5 years. You are my world, my reason, my beginning and my end. And I would do it all again, 10,000 times over, if it meant having you back. Lily, still dazed by the revelations, felt a primal instinct stir within her. This man, Arthur, had endured unimaginable pain, solely for her. He spoke of a love so profound it transcended worlds and time, a love that had literally brought her back from the dead. Her memories might be fragmented, but the raw, aching sincerity in his eyes resonated deep within her soul, awakening an echo of something familiar, something sacred. She leaned her head against his shoulder, a silent promise. I believe you, Arthur, she whispered, her voice fierce despite its softness. I don't remember everything yet, but I feel it. I feel you, and I won't let her take you, not after everything. A new protectiveness flared within her, fragile but undeniable, for the man who had sacrificed his very essence for her. A doctor then informed Arthur that Seraphina was stable, though she would require a long recovery. She was awake, and surprisingly had requested to see him. Arthur's jaw tightened. He knew what he had to do. This was the final, brutal cut he needed to make, to sever the last, lingering thread of that painful past. He kissed Lily's forehead, reassuring her. Stay here with the nurses, my love. I'll be back. He walked into Seraphina's private room, the scent of antiseptic thick in the air. She lay pale against the white sheets, tubes running from her, a bandage covering her temple. But her eyes, though clouded with pain and exhaustion, still held that desperate, burning plea he'd become so familiar with. Arthur, she croaked, her voice weak. Are you all right? Lily, is she okay? Arthur stood by the foot of her bed, his expression a mask of cold, unyielding resolve. No warmth, no pity, no trace of the forced tenderness he'd shown her for 5 years. "Lily is fine," he stated, his voice devoid of emotion. "Thanks to your intervention." He didn't thank her, didn't acknowledge the sacrifice as anything more than an inconvenience that had saved him from having to protect Lily himself. Seraphina flinched at his tone. "Arthur, I was so scared. When I saw the tree, I just couldn't let it hurt you. Not again. I know I messed up. I know I was cruel. But please tell me you felt something. That our 5 years weren't a complete lie." Her voice was a fragile plea, hope clinging to every syllable. Arthur's eyes, once so skilled at feigning affection, were now utterly empty. He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to a low, chilling register, each word a shard of ice. Seraphina listened very carefully. "There was no hour. There was never an US. Not for me. Every single touch, every soft word, every moment of comfort I offered you was a meticulously rehearsed part of a contract, a system task, a means to an end." Her face crumpled, a tear escaping her eye. No, that's not true. You saved me that night from the fire. You cooked for me. You were there for me. I saved you because the system required me to keep you safe until the final task was completed," he retorted, his voice rising, imbued with a venom he'd suppressed for years. "I cooked for you, yes, but those were the dishes Lily loved, a silent tribute to her memory on her birthday. Every act of kindness, every gesture of love, was a performance, designed to fulfill the system's quota, to make you believe so that you would continue to empower me, so that you would hand me the keys to Lily's resurrection. You were a means to an end, Seraphina. Nothing more." He saw the dawning horror, the understanding in her eyes. She was realizing the full, unadulterated truth of his deceit. This was the payback, the slow, excruciating unraveling of her world, just as his had been for 5 years. "And the recording pen," he continued, his voice now a low, dangerous growl. "The one that brought down Julian, that exposed his lies? That wasn't a gift, Seraphina. That was my final act of revenge. 5 years of humiliation, of watching you lavish affection on that parasite while I endured silently, invisible. I wanted you to feel the full weight of betrayal, to witness the destruction of your perfect love, just as you had unknowingly participated in the slow, agonizing destruction of mine. I wanted you to suffer, to regret, to understand what it felt like to have your entire reality exposed as a lie." He paused, letting the words hang in the air, each one a dagger twisting in her raw heart. Her face was ashen, her lips trembling, tears streaming silently down her temples. "So, when you wake up from this, Seraphina, know this: I never loved you. I never even liked you. Every moment I spent with you was a sacrifice, a payment, a step towards getting back the only woman I ever truly loved. And now she's back. And you are nothing to me. You never were, and you never will be." He turned and walked towards the door, his heart a cold, hard stone. He didn't look back. The mission was complete. The past was burned. And with Seraphina's devastated sob echoing behind him, Arthur Stone stepped into a future he had literally died for, a future where only Lily Evergreen existed. The cold, sterile air of the hospital corridor still carried the faint ghost of Seraphina's broken cry, a sound Arthur had deliberately inflicted. He had walked away, his heart a fortified citadel around Lily, but even his resolve couldn't entirely erase the image of her crumpled form, the raw, unvarnished despair on her face. He knew his words were brutal, designed to sever every lingering thread, to ensure his mission was truly complete. Yet, as he returned to Lily's room, a minuscule, unwanted tremor ran through him. It was not regret, he told himself, but the aftershocks of a necessary demolition. He found Lily asleep, her features peaceful, untouched by the maelstrom he had just navigated. He sat by her bedside, watching the slow rise and fall of her chest, a profound sense of exhaustion washing over him. The past 5 years had been a labyrinth of calculated cruelty and self-inflicted pain. Now the path was clear, but the destination, Lily's full return, remained just out of reach. He stroked her hair, a silent vow passing between them in the quiet room. Hours later, as dusk bled into night, a tentative knock echoed. Arthur tensed, expecting a nurse, but the door creaked open to reveal Seraphina. Her eyes, still swollen and red-rimmed, met his with a plea so raw, it almost bypassed his defenses. She stood there, a shadow of her former imperious self, clutching a small, unassuming bag. I know what you said," she began, her voice a fragile whisper that cracked on the last word. "And I accept it. My mission is a failure. The system already confirmed it. I'm to be recalled. But I have 3 days left. 3 days before it takes me back. Please, Arthur. Just 3 days. Let me experience something real, something normal with you. No lies, no missions, no Lily. Just a farewell." Arthur stared at her, a knot tightening in his gut. His immediate instinct was to refuse, to slam the door on this final, desperate gambit. It felt like another attempt at manipulation, another test. But then he saw the tremor in her hands, the genuine agony in her eyes. This wasn't the proud, cold Seraphina Thorne he knew. This was a woman stripped bare, facing an ending she never anticipated, paying a cruel price for her own blind devotion. And a strange thought surfaced. Perhaps allowing this was the final, most complete act of closure. To show her one last time that his heart was not, and never would be, hers. "No Lily?" he repeated, his voice flat. Seraphina flinched. "I understand. She's everything to you. I wouldn't try to interfere. Just let me see what it was like to be a normal person even for a moment. To have a day where I wasn't trying to complete a task and you weren't trying to deceive me." A long silence stretched between them, punctuated only by Lily's soft breathing. Arthur's mind raced. What would Lily think? What would this cost him? But then he remembered his promise to himself. Total honesty, total loyalty to Lily. And the system's tasks were done. This was Seraphina's final request before disappearing from his life forever. 3 days, Arthur finally conceded, his voice devoid of warmth. "But you understand, Seraphina. This changes nothing. My heart belongs only to Lily. These days are for your closure, not for us. And if you cross any line, if you try anything, I will end it immediately." A flicker of something akin to gratitude, mixed with a profound sadness, crossed her face. "I understand," she whispered. "Thank you, Arthur." The first day was an exercise in surreal normalcy. Seraphina suggested a simple breakfast at a local diner. Arthur, still wary, agreed. They sat across from each other, the aroma of coffee and pancakes filling the air, a stark contrast to the opulence of the Thorne mansion or the sterile hospital. Seraphina talked, not about her regrets or her mission, but about mundane things. Her childhood, a forgotten hobby of painting, the simple joy of a sunny morning. Arthur listened, offering only monosyllabic responses. He watched her, seeing the subtle shifts in her expressions, the way she absently traced patterns on the table. For the first time, he saw not the antagonist, but a lost woman grasping at fragments of a life she'd never truly lived. It was disquieting, this glimpse of vulnerability. It chipped away, minutely, at the perfect villain he had constructed. That afternoon, she asked to walk in a park. They ambled along a tree-lined path, the rustling leaves providing a gentle backdrop to their silence. Seraphina pointed out a small bird building a nest, her voice soft with a childlike wonder Arthur had never associated with her. He found himself answering a question about the type of tree, an almost automatic response before catching himself. He clenched his jaw, remembering Lily. Every interaction, every moment of perceived connection, felt like a betrayal to the woman sleeping in the hospital. This was a test of his resolve, a final gauntlet. The second day, Seraphina proposed they visit a small, independent bookstore. She spent hours browsing, a contemplative look on her face as she ran her fingers over dusty spines. She picked up a worn copy of a classic romance novel, something Arthur would never have imagined her reading. "I always thought love was supposed to be grand," she murmured, not quite to him, "like in these stories. But sometimes it's just quiet and persistent." Arthur said nothing, but the words echoed in his mind, drawing an uncomfortable parallel to his own quiet, persistent love for Lily. Later, over a simple meal Seraphina cooked in a rented Airbnb, a surprisingly good pasta dish, she confessed, her voice barely audible. "I was so afraid to be vulnerable, so afraid of anyone seeing the real me. I built walls. And Julian, he was so good at finding the cracks and filling them with promises. I mistook his control for devotion. I mistook your suffering for nothing." She looked directly at him then, her eyes brimming. "I am so sorry, Arthur. Truly. I squandered your loyalty, your heart, all for a lie." Arthur met her gaze, his own eyes like chips of ice. "My loyalty was never yours to squander, Seraphina. My heart was never yours to begin with. You saw what you wanted to see, just as I allowed you to." His words were harsh but necessary. He couldn't let pity soften his edge. Not now, not when Lily was so close. On the third and final day, Seraphina requested one last thing: to watch the sunrise from a hill overlooking the city. Arthur, feeling the imminent end, agreed. They drove in silence before dawn, the city lights twinkling below like scattered diamonds. As the first blush of pink painted the horizon, Seraphina turned to him. Her eyes, free of tears now, held a profound sorrow, but also a strange peace. "Thank you, Arthur," she said, her voice clear and steady. "For these 3 days. They won't change anything for you, I know, but they showed me what I truly lost, what I truly was, and what I could have been." She reached out, her hand hovering, then gently touched his cheek. Her touch was feather-light, almost a ghost, yet it sent a jolt through him. "Live a good life, Arthur. With your Lily. You deserve it, more than anyone I've ever known." Before Arthur could react, before he could even process the foreign warmth of her hand, a small, insistent cough broke the stillness. He spun around. Standing just a few feet away, silhouetted against the nascent sunrise, was Lily. Her eyes, wide and unfocused moments ago, were now sharp, burning with a sudden, fierce possessiveness as she stared at Seraphina's retreating hand on Arthur's cheek. "Arthur!" Lily's voice, a mixture of confusion and raw jealousy, cut through the quiet. What is going on?" Her eyes darted from Seraphina, who now stood frozen, her hand slowly dropping, to Arthur. The gentle, almost innocent wonder that had been in Lily's eyes since her awakening was gone, replaced by a storm of unfamiliar emotions. She took a hesitant step forward, her gaze fixed on Seraphina, then back to Arthur. And then it happened. A sudden, blinding flash ignited in Lily's eyes. Her head swam, images crashing into her mind like tidal waves. Arthur's face, etched with pain, giving her flowers in the hospital. Arthur, years ago, proposing under a canopy of stars. Arthur, holding her hand as they walked through a sun-drenched field. Arthur, whispering promises of forever. The 5 years, the system, the sacrifice, the fake girlfriend. It all coalesced into a single, agonizingly clear narrative. "Seraphina?" Lily whispered, the name a foreign, yet intimately familiar, weight on her tongue. Her gaze hardened on the other woman. Then, she turned to Arthur, her eyes now brimming with tears, not of confusion, but of understanding, of relief, and of a searing, furious love. "Arthur, you did this. For me. You went through all of that for me." Lily's voice rose, a crescendo of emotion. She launched herself at him, throwing her arms around his neck, burying her face in his shoulder. I remember everything. You idiot. You wonderful, crazy idiot." "My time is up," Seraphina said, her voice faint, already fading. Her eyes, filled with an ancient regret, met Arthur's one last time. May you both find the peace you fought for. And with that, the shimmering distortion intensified, consumed her entirely, and then vanished, leaving only the nascent light of dawn and the echoing silence of the hilltop. She was gone, returned to her own world. Her mission irrevocably failed. Her role in Arthur's life finally concluded. Arthur stood there, holding Lily tightly, watching the spot where Seraphina had just been. A strange emptiness settled in the space she had occupied, a void created by the end of a long, painful chapter. But then Lily tightened her grip, pulling him back, her warm, living presence a potent antidote to any lingering shadows. "Arthur?" Lily whispered, her face radiant with understanding and rediscovered love. "You did it. You brought me back." He kissed her then, a desperate, passionate kiss that tasted of tears and triumph, and the promise of a future finally free of systems and lies. His hands traced the contours of her face, marveling at the vivid spark in her eyes, the full, complete presence of her memory. "We're together?" Arthur murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "Finally, forever." They stood on the hilltop, bathed in the golden light of the rising sun, the city awakening below them. The past, with all its agony and sacrifice, was a distant echo. The future, with Lily by his side, stretched out, bright and boundless. His true love, his only love, was finally truly home. And this time, no system, no mission, no fake girlfriend could ever take her away.